Continuing on with chapter 13. Okay, so this is on page 350 and we have this big long list. So the positives and negatives of cities, and they go way down here. So these ones used 3 sticky notes for each column. Okay, so let's go through the positive column first. So what's good about cities? Well, environmentally speaking. All right, so you have a higher population density in cities, which means that you leave more intact ecosystem outside the city. So example, in Japan, 35% of their entire population lives in Tokyo, which means, and they do this on purpose because this leaves more pristine forest systems available for ecosystem services. So they don't allow sprawl too much there. And so people live in high density houses and tall skyscrapers, but then the forests are there and you can go out to the forest on weekends and you can enjoy nature. And it also, remember, the forests provide huge amounts of ecosystem services, from air purification to water purification to providing lumber, etc. So in cities also you have better medical care and more efficient public services, like libraries and universities and things like that. Better medical care typically because you're closer to large hospitals and you have more doctors and specialists in cities. In city centers or high density centers, more people walk, bike, or take buses, which lowers the carbon emissions from fossil fuels. So this also helps prevent climate change from burning fossil fuels. So this is in city centers, again, which have high density centers. So like Santa Clarita, this is not the case because in Santa Clarita, although we're a city and we meet the definition of urban, we are sprawled too much where people really do have to travel quite a ways even within the city to run errands. And so we use our cars and burn a lot of fossil fuels. So if you move to downtown LA where you have a loft, or into Koreatown or places like that, or even around Valencia Town Center, then you don't need your car as much, so you're not emitting as many carbon from fossil fuels. Okay, so some negative parts of cities. It's a resource sink, which means a resource sink is an area where you use more than you produce. So Santa Clarita is a resource sink. We import in fuel for our cars and our homes to heat. We import in food. We don't grow food here. We have to bring it in from other places. So we produce a little bit of stuff, maybe some goods in the industrial center, but really we have to bring in more than we produce. So we're called a resource sink. So we have more air, water, and noise and light pollution in cities. So air pollution from cars and factories, water pollution, noise pollution, light pollution. This affects the poor more as an environmental justice issue. So what this means is that most of the air, water pollution is in poorer places. So in a city like Santa Clarita, if there was a water pollution issue, people are going to be fighting it because we have the education and the money to fight a company that's polluting our water if we know who is polluting it. We did that with a landfill. They were going to build a landfill in Santa Clarita about 20 years ago. And our city fought it so vehemently, the county changed, or the state, I don't even know who, changed their plans and they decided not to build it. But that's because we have the political power and the money to fight it, but poor people do not. So most of the pollution in the world and in the United States is in poorer neighborhoods because they don't have the funds to move and they don't have the funds to fight it politically. Okay, so heat islands. So what this means is it's hotter because of concrete and asphalt in cities than it is in the surrounding areas. So that means we're heat islands. So cities, because of wealth, tend to have a bigger eco footprint. So in cities, you tend to have more wealthy people. And so they can buy more and buy more expensive cars and drive more and go on bigger vacations and buy more luxury goods and imported cheeses from France and things like that. All of those have a big eco footprint. So in the suburbs, we alter the carbon cycle by burning more fossil fuels in the suburbs. So if you live, so let me show you the difference. So down here we wrote that you burn less if you live in a high density urban area because of buses or walking. But if you live in a low density suburban urban area, so suburbs are also urban. It's a little confusing. But again, if you have an area more than 2,500 people, you are urban. So even though we're the suburbs, we're also considered urban. So if you've got your city that is a sprawling city, you are going to burn more fossil fuels, which will release more carbon, which will cause global warming and climate change. All right, another thing that happens in cities is that we alter the water cycle with impervious surfaces that prevent infiltration. So impervious means you can't go through. So the water hits the concrete, it can't go through the concrete, and it runs off. So it prevents infiltration into the soil and leads to flooding. And we kind of wrote back that a little bit in a few pages before, and I really want to emphasize it. So we have less recharge into our aquifers. Another thing that we do with our water cycle in cities is we deplete the groundwater. So in a lot of cities, Santa Clarita included, we get a lot of our drinking water from underground, and we pump it up and we treat it and we drink it. If you live at a coastal city and you do that too much, then what happens underground is salt water kind of seeps from the ocean underground into your aquifer. So if you pump your aquifer too low, it kind of creates an empty space, and the water from the ocean will flow underground into that empty space under the city. And now your groundwater is unusable, or you have to now treat it to get rid of the salt, because you can't drink salt water. It's like, will kill you. So this is one of these problems. So these two right here are specific things with cities that the AP test really wants you to know about, in addition to these other things, but these are kind of some factoids. Oh, and the carbon cycle too. All right, another thing on the AP test that is new is more emphasis on noise pollution. So I've always taught noise pollution, but recently they've added more standards that you have to know about. And so they want you to know that it causes psychological stress and hearing loss in humans. And it can come from transportation, cars, buses, airplanes too, if you live near an airport, very loud. Even things like helicopters. Today I was at Central Park and there was a helicopter above. It was just noisy. Construction, industry. So animals also can be affected by noise pollution. It can stress them. So these are animals in nature, not your pet. So whatever, squirrels and birds and whatever. It can mask their sounds that are used to communicate or hunt. So for example, in the ocean, whales get, they are influenced by sonar. So Navy ships have sonar, and it can actually mess up the whales communicating with each other. It can damage animals' hearing. It can change migratory routes. Down here is more about the urban heat island effect. So you should take some time to just read this and understand why it's warmer in cities and compared to the outside areas. And that's it for chapter 13.